Hello, welcome to the November 19th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test to make sure all the audio is coming through as expected, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Give me just a second. Hello, welcome to the... All right, everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. I work as a product specialist for Yamaha Corporation of America, primarily focusing on Steinberg products. I'm broadcasting or presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States in Alexandria, Virginia. So I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream, how it works is you can ask questions in the chat field, and we'll try to go through each of the questions chronologically as they come in and answer them as completely and as succinctly as possible. But realize that my ability to answer in kind of real-time manner, that sometimes I may be an hour behind the live chat. So when asking questions, if you don't get an immediate response, please realize that I will, usually by the end of the live stream, I will have caught up, but realize that it may be a little while, sometimes 45 minutes, an hour, by the time I get to the question. So if we could try to avoid asking the same question repeatedly over and over again, that would be appreciated, because that just kind of slows down the process. When asking questions, if you could indicate, which level of Cubase, such as Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version, 10, 10.5, 11, as well as your operating system. I'm running on Mac or Windows. That information is often helpful as well. So we will have an index of all the topics covered in the live stream tonight, pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps. So you could actually go back after and search for particular topics if you want it. Also, questions can be sent in advance by emailing clubcubase@steinberg.de. So that's another. So if it's something that could be a little more involved with that, you could send those in advance. If you wanted to search for topics that have been covered on previous live streams, you could go to CubaseIndex.com, and Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to set up a website, so that will search through over 14,000 topics and could take you immediately right to the area in a live stream where that topic has been covered. So we want to give special thanks to Jan for coming up with that website. Also, we have two people that serve as moderators. We usually have a really well-behaved community, but occasionally someone tries to sell something nefarious. So, but I want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude and Agent K for their help. They're not Steinberg employees. They just kind of do it to benefit the community. So special thanks to them. Another wonderful resource of information is compiled by Jazz Dude in the Cubase Nation Discord. So an extra special thanks to Jazz Dude for that and all of his efforts in kind of providing such a wonderful resource to the Steinberg community. One quick note, next Friday's live stream will be in the United States. It's the day after Thanksgiving, and that's a holiday, so we won't be doing a live stream next Friday, but we will do Tuesday and then the following Tuesday, and the second Tuesday, like a week from Tuesday, that will be the last live stream of the month. So we will try to, usually the last live stream of the month, what we do is do kind of a 2-hour live stream and then a 2-hour kind of Zoom meetup so people can meet up with each other. And I'm working on getting kind of a special guest that can kind of share some insights on music production and career advice and stuff like that. So we've had people like Vince Melmed and Fred Corey, and last month we had Daryl Pearson was able to share some insights. We had Jean-Marie Horvat prior to that. So look forward to seeing everyone on that. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so first question. Hi, Greg and Cubase friends. Is there a way to turn a whole drum kit in Groove Agent into separate audio tracks, like a real drum recording session for mixing purposes? So let's say if I have just a drum track here. So right now we can see that everything is going out of a stereo output into, and then feeding our stereo. So we have our stereo instance of Groove Agent feeding our stereo bus. But if I go to the instruments, and let's go to the mixer tab, I can now come over here, and Groove Agent can have up to 32 stereo outputs. So let's say I want my kick to go out of output 2, my snare to go out of output 3. So as we do this, this automatically adds the outputs from Groove Agent. And let's say, okay, I want the hi-hats to go out of output 4. And let's say the room, maybe the overheads, I want it to go to output 5 and output 6 for the room mics. So now we can have the audio kind of automatically mapped across different outputs. So if I have this particular pattern playing, so let's say, and so we could mix it like this just with outputs. So that's easy enough to do. So if you wanted to do it, but if you wanted to turn it into separate audio files, once that the file here has, we have one MIDI file, and if we wanted to take each of these different outputs and render those two separate files, all we have to do is just go to edit and choose to do a render in place. And we could just come right over here and say, okay, I want to keep the channel settings. And I will just at this point, let's just choose to render. So I'll just not give it a custom name, and I'll say render. And as we do this, each of the outputs will automatically be rendered to their own individual audio file. So we have kicks just kind of broken down right here. Let's have our snares, hi-hats, kind of the overheads, and the rooms. So that's how you could split it up. And now that we have it split up into individual tracks, we could mix and do, clip gain, volume control. So once again, just, set the outputs from the instrument itself. So again, we'll just come right over here, and as we select the instrument, at that point, so once I'll just undo that just so we can see it. So we'll say directly from here, assign to the different outputs, and then just do a render in place, and that should kind of do the trick for you. So. All right, so we'll now come over here. Let's take a look at the next question. See some other people giving other methods, but it may take you a little longer. We see Jazz Dude has a template for this. All right, and we have Dallas LaRue checking in from Las Vegas. Okay, so we have a question from Dallas LaRue. In the control room, excuse me, the monitor inserts are inserts after the stereo of Cubase and before the speaker. These inserts also have a pre-post insert. Pre-post to what? All right, so let's take a look. So I don't remember there. Let's take a look. So let's say if I come over here to the main and inserts. So if I have a particular plugin, let's say I will activate this plugin. All right, so usually when we have inserts kind of laid out for us here, we could right click and then switch it. So if I wanted to take this particular audio track, and if I had let's look at this, and if I wanted to put a particular plugin on it, I could right click on it and then move to post fader slot. So we could do pre and post fader there, but I don't see that on the control room settings. So once I go to the inserts here on my control room, let's say on the main, so if I wanted to look at this, I could, usually it's kind of just right clicking, but I don't see a way of toggling pre or post fader on the particular inserts on the, on the main inserts. Let's look at the monitor inserts, see if there's anything different. So let's say so these will all be pre-fader, as we could see kind of indicated here. All right, so I see, okay, the last two here will be post fader. So let's say if I have my reverence, all right, so let's say if we play, so it looks like maybe on the last two here would be post fader. Okay, so let me just adjust the settings on the instrument here and see if we can get it going. All right, so I'll put this in the post fader, and let's say if we come over here to our pitch shift, let's just add a reverb here. So okay, so now let's see if I adjust. So I think it might be kind of tied into, let's say if I wanted to switch this out. All right, let me just kill. I think I have another effect going on somewhere. So, and this might be intended for using dithering plugins. So let's say if I'm here, and let's say, all right, so say if I wanted to come over here, put this into like a post fader. So let's say if I wanted to go to the analyzer, and let's say if it's post fader, it looks like that's kind of behaving kind of as expected, but I think it might be kind of reserved for dithering, but probably not for kind of more traditional pre and post fader. So maybe it's just with that particular, like for dithering at that stage where the dithering won't be affected, but most plugins probably wouldn't make sense to utilize it there. But I could do some more research if you want to email me, Dallas. All right, so we have Jan checking in from Sweden. Okay, so we have a question from Jay from Connecticut. Is there a way to lock a folder track? I created a metronome with kick and snare with Groove Agent, but I don't want to accidentally disturb it. Is there another way to do it without track lanes? So let's say if we have folder tracks, so I'll just come to this particular project here quickly. All right, so let's say if I wanted to now come over here, let's take a look at the track controls settings. So if we right click on the folder track, excuse me, we could right click on the folder track and go to track control settings. And here we could see one of the parameters that's hidden is lock. So let's take it from a hidden control to a visible control. So I'll just so if I wanted to remove it, or we could add it to the visible controls, I'll click apply. So as soon as we come over here now, we could lock that particular folder. So I won't be able to move that folder, but other tracks that are not within that folder can be moved. So as soon as you wanted to move something within the folder that's locked, you could do that. So once again, just right click J and go to the track control settings, and under hidden controls, you'll probably see lock. And at that point, just click it to add, and then visible, and then you could lock and unlock the folder track so parts don't inadvertently get moved. All right, wonderful. See Uno Momento from Finland and John Costigan from Kenosha, the city of brotherly love, as John has indicated. So, all right, we have Trance 2020 from Berkshire in the UK. Thanks for joining. We have Nick from Essex in the UK, Millard Brown from Pennsylvania. I believe he's just outside of Philadelphia. We have Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina, Ted Springman from Sherman Oaks. We have Soren, Sweden, Cedric from India, Sable Winters from Bay Area. And we have Rick from Oregon. All right, we have the Cube, who's in Florida. All right, so we see a question from the Cube. Cubase Pro 11, how do you use the step designer effectively? All right, so let me just jump to a different project here. Just get this project loaded up here. Excuse me. Okay, so let's say I have like a little bit of a synth bass here. Okay, so I think if we come over here to like the MIDI insert, that we'll see our step designer. So at this point, you know, a lot of these plugins, if you just kind of start off with, you know, some of the built-in presets. So let's say I will come over here, and if I wanted to take just an existing note, so let's say I'm going to come in and just draw in one note that will last for 2 measures. Okay, so now when we play this one particular note, we could come over here and say, okay, I want it to have so if you wanted to, you know, come over here, you could just say, okay, I want the velocity to be changed. So once it kind of has, so we can think of this as kind of like its own arpeggiator. And then you could just come over here and say, okay, I wanted this to be brightness, depending on the So, as we just kind of take one particular part, I'll just solo this track. So as soon as we kind of have this, we can say, okay, I want this to be 16ths. So we could just kind of think of this as being, its own little sequencer. So if I just wanted to. So even now, like when you just go to play a particular note, we could just have those particular notes just go through the particular step designer. So, think of this as just being its own little mini sequencer that could run as like a sub sequencer within your Cubase project. So lots of fun there. Okay, question from Randy Lee. Is a 6-core machine acceptable for Cubase 11 Pro? So, it could really depend on, the more cores that you have. But, if you had to pick, and I realize that budget's always a concern for people, but if you had to pick between number of cores and the clock CPU of the cores, if you had to kind of choose between, I would go for a higher clock CPU than more cores with a lower clock CPU. So, but a 6-core machine will definitely work. All right, and we have Best Korean Jesus checking in, so thanks for joining us. And the Cube is checking in from Melbourne, Florida. And we have Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania, Jeff Sabelski from Chico, California, and we have Daniel from Munich. Daniel saying it sounds like I have a little bit of a cold, so I'm just a little congested, so sorry if it's annoying. I feel fine now. Okay, so we have a question. Can you show how the different grid types work and how they work for playback? I'm also looking how to set up grid so it shows each measure in different playback, i.e. 4/4, 6/8, and soon. Okay, so what we could do is we could actually kind of do this in conjunction with like the actual editors for like the click track. So let's say if I have a signature track here, so I will add a signature track, and let's say I wanted to see my grid. So right now we could go to, if I'm going to double click here, and we could see our click pattern is kind of broken down into like 4 beats. So let's say at this point we could also choose to use the metronome click, right click on the timeline. We could choose to use the metronome click pattern level for grid line emphasis. So if I wanted to now come over here, and let's say if this measure, we want it to be 6/8. And let's say, okay, I want this to be 3/4. And let's say 5/4. All right, and let's say back to 4/4. Okay, so as we come over here, we could actually just say, we could have, like we go to 6, as we do this, we could say, we could, see our divisions here. So we can see our 6 note, our 6/8 notes. We can see our 3/4 as it's going to snap. So, if you wanted to say, snap to beat, now it's only going to, as I move different elements, we could have it snap to the beat whether you're in 6/8, so that would be the 8th note pulse, or 3/4, or 5/4 for particular measures. So at this point, we could just have that automatically snap to the beat very easily. So, I would, if you want it to, all right, so it says, and how they work for playback. So a lot of times, this may not affect playback, but, as you do editing, if you have grid turned on, so here I can freely edit like MIDI notes and place it anywhere. So if I add a instrument track, and I'm on my main project window, and I can say, excuse me, we can say, okay, I want snap to be on, and if I have this set to beat, it will now automatically snap to the beat, whether it's going to be in 6/8 or in 3/4 or 5/4. And then if I wanted to take this and say I wanted to change my click pattern to double tempo, at this point, we could actually see the grid line emphasis just kind of follow right along if we wanted to have that chosen there. So it, may not affect value, but like the grid lines are going to be used primarily for editing, whether it's the part on the project window. So, and again, we could activate the snap by hitting J, or with notes within the particular project window here. So if I just say, okay, let's, come here. So it'd be kind of the same thing once we have particular MIDI notes, so that we could have these automatically snap based on the grid right there. So, but let me know if I misunderstood the question. All right, so we see Jan from Stockholm is on the live stream. All right, and we have Oral Cole checking in from Jamaica. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Theodore checking in from London. Thanks for being on the live stream. All right, so we see a question. Sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. Okay, so it says, you may have already answered this in our streams, but will Cubase 12 make Windows 10 obsolete? And also the current dongle I have set up for Steinberg. So Cubase 12 will be utilizing a new license management system. So so I don't think you have any concerns on Windows 10. So they're not going to abandon Windows 10. Because Windows 11 is so new, but your Cubase 11 will still work on a USB-E licenser, and going forward, the newer versions will work on the new Steinberg license management system. All right, I'm going to just pop out my chat here really quick. I may hopefully not lose anything, but... All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer is late because he was watching Robert Plant and Alison Krauss performing a couple of tunes off their new album. So yeah, I really liked their first album they did. And I've gotten to be in the studio with Alison Krauss a couple times. Okay, so we have a question. Can you show how to tweak the reverb and other effects and aux effects after exporting the Groove Agent SE mixer and effects to Cubase? Thanks. Okay, so I will come over here. Let's see if this is... We'll activate this project. All right, so let's say... All right, so let's say I wanted to add more reverb to the snare. And let's say I wanted to add a delay for aux send 2. So let's say I want it to be maybe a 16th note. So let's say I want to do the hi-hat. All right, so we have like a lot of reverb going on. So when I go to my mixer settings, so what I want to do now is just come right over here. So I wanted to transfer this into the Cubase mixer. So I'm going to say right click on the agent and choose export mixer and effects to Cubase. So now just gonna try it on a brand new instance real quick since I have some other routing stuff. So I'll start from scratch, just make sure I didn't do it wrong. All right, so I'll just add another. Okay, so let's go ahead and export. So let's see if I come over here real quick and I'll just go, let's say to my mixer, and let's say if I need to set this maybe to different outputs, but I think most of the time it would just automatically, let's see if I had to assign these to different outs for that to take effect. So it doesn't look like I'm getting the effects to carry over on the output, but it might be replicating as inserts. Let me just check. Yeah, so I don't see the effects being carried over. But if you want to email me after, I'd be happy to kind of see if I'm just doing something wrong with that. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, can you explain how the pan law works? So with the pan law, what it's going to do, and sometimes, you know, and we can do this in the project setup. So when you go to the project setup, you have pan law. So, you know, we could think of, you know, as we start working with panning signals. So if we have a stereo signal, we could think of it as we would pan it from, you know, if we have two sources, doubling the sound could make it sound as if it's going to be, you know, like twice the volume. So if we add, you know, if we double a sound, that could actually, you know, basically just make it the volume twice as much. So I'll just do this on a... Let's see if we could do this. And this is something you don't necessarily see in the... Let's see if we can do it on this. Take a hot mess track here. All right, so if I wanted to take this pan here, all right, so when we go to our pan setting here in the project setup, we're gonna say equal, we'll say equal power. So when I adjust my panning, that will keep the volume levels pretty consistent from the left to right channels. But if I wanted to switch this to -6 dB, now as I kind of pan, we could hear that the actual panning, like as we pan farther out, the volume level decreases. So you see it gets louder there, and as we pan over to the left, we could hear that it's basically gets softer. So if I wanted to do this and make it so that it's 0 dB difference, so as I do this, those two levels will now be the same. So usually with kind of the physics of audio, doubling a source will give you a 3 dB increase. So people will often manipulate the pan law so that, you know, they could make their, you know, like harder panned tracks come out a little bit louder. So some people would actually specifically change the pan law from default values so that as tracks were panned, that they're more prominent when they're panned and they don't attenuate down. So that's kind of what the pan law allows you to do. All right, so we have 16 Flow checking in from Kenya. Kyle Kennedy is taking a break from a writing session. Thanks for joining. Okay, so we just see then how do you get the MIDI from the step designer into the project? Watching now, so let's jump back. So we'll activate this project. we'll just kind of do it from scratch here. So if you actually just kind of click here on the little record icon, now you could just then all of the sequence will now be captured directly into the project. If you wanted to do it on a part, let's say we have one note here that's kind of stretched out, and if we wanted that to take to show the actual effect of the step designer, we could go to MIDI and just choose to freeze MIDI modifiers, and then you could kind of change it, but just click right here on the record, and as you hit play, it'll actually just generate the parts and capture it in real time directly into your Cubase project. All right, so we have a question from Benny. Is it possible to get all settings in the control room to upload in each new project, or do I have to go to settings and upload the saved that I created in the control room? So I believe that the control room settings are project independent, and that they will, so you don't have to do anything to load it. So if you go to a different project, so let's say I come over here, I have my inserts loaded up. So let's say now I wanted to, let's say I have a UV22 plugin here. So if I go to a new project, that these aren't necessarily associated with the project. I believe that they're just going to be associated with your Cubase settings. So we can see that my UV22R will just be directly in there, so we don't have to do anything special. The control room is kind of independent of the project, so as you load up a new project, the control room settings will just automatically stick until you physically change it. All right, so John Costigan is telling people to hit the like button, and it's free of charge. So that's a great deal. So it'll be our pre-Black Friday special. All right, so we got Peter checking in. Okay, so we just see from Kyle Kennedy, is there a simple way to make a long section multimeter, i.e. alternating 4/4 and 7/8? So let's take a look. So let's add a signature track. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to take that. So if you just select, if we select those two meters, so say I select my 4/4 and 7/8, and then I could just hit Command D, like duplicate. So you could just kind of come right over here, and so as long as they're selected, you could just duplicate those particular ones and select 4 of them, duplicate, select 8, duplicate, etc. You could also just say select all, duplicate. So if you just kind of do it like that on the meter, you could alternate between 4/4 and 7/8, so you don't have to do it repeatedly over and over again. So I just see from Soren, does render in place exist in the artist version? I don't have a version of artist, but I'll do a quick look on the Cubase comparison chart just to make sure. So yes, Cubase Artist does have render in place. So yeah, you could definitely utilize the Cubase Artist version with render in place. All right, so we have Matthew Elston, Matt checking in from London. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we just see from Jay, it says floor context setting up Nephew with Cubase Elements demo to see if the DAW will suit him. So I got Elements and tinkering, but cannot find a folder track lock in Elements. So let's open up. I have kind of a previous version of Elements that I will open up. We'll see if it's in. Okay, so let's just add a folder track. So it doesn't look like maybe the Elements version. Let me just check here. So we'll select folder track. So maybe the Elements version doesn't have the lock. But if you have events already in a particular folder track, you could come over here. Let's see, let's see if that's a function in Elements or if that's maybe in the higher end ones. So it might be something that's going to be kind of in the more advanced versions, the lock functionality. So I'll just see if I could confirm it maybe in key commands. Yeah, so it doesn't look like Elements has kind of track locking capabilities like Artist or Pro does. Sorry about that. All right, so we just see a question. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, can the performance meter also display percentages as well? So the performance meter, I don't think will show you percentages. So as you're playing, you know, we could just come over here. Let's go to our audio performance. So it's not going to show an exact percentage. So it's just kind of a visual indication. So, but that should kind of give you an idea graphically what's going on, but you know, it may not show you exactly 52%. You may just kind of have to try to guesstimate it. All right, so we have Kai Wen Franklin on the live stream. Thanks for joining. All right, and we have David Griffiths from Wales checking in, watching the live stream. All right, so we just see a question. How does Chopper work? All right, so I'll just kind of put it on a global thing so we can make it really obvious as we're working with it. So if I put it on like my whole mix, we could say, okay, I want this to be set to 8th notes. So as you kind of work with different style of tracks, you'll have kind of different shapes. So if you wanted to add something that was maybe a little more, you could adjust the depth. So if you want it to be so at this point, so say if I don't want to do it on the whole mix and I just wanted to do it on guitars, I could come over here. Let's take our 2 guitar parts and I'm going to send these to a group. And let's say on the guitar group, I want to just put the chopper. So let's say I want this to be so it's basically just gonna chop the source. Or if you want to go like hard left or hard right. So you could just kind of add more kind of rhythmic interest in parts. So that's just going to take, so if we bypassed it, so let's say, okay, you just wanted to make it a little more interesting when it goes into the bridge. Or blend that with another source. You could automate the plugin, so you could do all sorts of very creative stuff with the chopper. All right, we have Greedo Kenobi checking in. Thanks for joining. So I just see a comment. I bought Cubase 11. Then you get so many options. Cubase versions, it's too much. So you don't have to use all the options if there's too many options for you. But when you do need them, they are there. Okay. So you see with then you get so many options. So if you're confused, like it's the difference between the different versions. Definitely check out like the Cubase. I think we still have this open. If you just kind of come over here, you could see kind of very detailed comparison charts between them. So if you're confused on, should I get Elements, Artist, or Pro, you could definitely kind of go through these different things and see exactly, what functionality you get in each level of Cubase and see if that's what you need. And you could, just kind of, if you don't know what a particular terminology is, you could probably just search for it on CubaseIndex.com, and there's probably going to be a video of almost every one of those features on CubaseIndex.com. See, David Griffith is also just confirming Render in Place as an artist. Okay, going through. Okay, so we have it's just a question. I have a project song that's all audio tracks, and I want to speed up that whole song up. But how do I do it without affecting the sync of the other audio tracks going out of place? So like this project here, as soon as you record an audio into Cubase, so let's say if I'll just quickly revert this particular project. Okay, so, Cubase will capture the tempo of the recording. So if I wanted to come right over here and I'm going to add an audio track and we'll call it tempo test. Okay, so as I record this audio file here, called tempo test, all right. Now when I go to look in the pool window, this will be all of the audio files in the project. We'll see tempo test, and my tempo here was originally 100 beats a minute. So that's where my project tempo was when I recorded it. But if I wanted to go to the pool, we can see that the tempo test is automatically placed at 100 beats a minute. So the tempo is automatically captured by Cubase, and what you need to do is to just put it into musical mode. So we could do this from the pool or by selecting all of the events in the project and saying, okay, I want to select all of these, and we see musical mode right here. So once we've done that, I could just change the tempo. So we're at 100 beats a minute. I want to be 110. 120, 156, 88. It'll just kind of do whatever tempo that I want it to do. So once it's placed into musical mode, so even if I add a tempo track here, we could just say, okay, we're going to have it follow the tempo track, and I want the tempo track to ramp up. So let's say, okay, starting right here, I want it to speed up over time. So if we look at our tempo, right here, we can just see the tempo increasing and all the different instruments in sync, increasing in speed till we get to this particular tempo value. So just that easy to do. So you want to make sure that, as you record, that you have kind of a tempo basis. If you kind of record it and don't know what the tempo is, if you kind of do a tempo detection, you could have that automatically applied. But once you record in with the tempo, then place it into musical mode and you could just simply speed it up. Okay, reading through comments and all right, so I just see a question from John Costigan. I think this is about some further discussion of like the tempo mode. Says, can you do this in the pool all at once? So if you wanted to enable musical mode in the pool, all you have to do is kind of select all the files here. And then once they're all selected, I just select the top one, hold down the shift key, select the bottom one, and then you could place them all into musical mode or change their tempos accordingly, and that would be applied to all of the files in the project. All right, so we see from Joel, is there a way to simply lock markers and time signature changes? So let's say, if we have markers in our project. Okay, so let's say if I have markers and I will add let's just say we're going to add a tempo track up top here. Okay, I guess I have a tempo track already. All right, so yeah, I just added that. Sorry for my brain cramp. Okay, and I wanted to now add, let's say I have this set to SMPTE time code. So let's say right now I wanted to go to, and I'll just set my main time frame here to, let's say 30 seconds and 21 frames. Okay, so I wanted to now click on add markers. So let's say I wanted to go to 40 seconds. All right, so I will add a marker here. Let's go to 50 seconds in time code, add a marker, and just go to 01. Okay, so let's say now at this point, we have markers at every 10 seconds. So we go to marker 3, we're at 40, 50, 60 seconds. Okay, now the markers, something that you need to be aware of is you could go to the track control settings, and one of the things that you could do is there's a toggle time base, but there's also kind of a lock function. So these may be hidden, so right click. So, if I wanted these to be in musical mode, so let's say now if I adjust my tempo here, so let's say I slow my tempo down. Okay, I'm at the same kind of, when we do this, we could have the markers. Let's say I go to marker 4 now, and that's at 52 seconds versus 50 seconds. Marker 3 is at 42 seconds. So let's say I want it again for this to be, so I didn't want these to actually change. So when I come to this marker now, it's at 40, 50, and 1 minute. So if I place this into linear mode, and as I adjust my tempo down, those markers are going to stay at the same time position. So when I come here, 40 seconds, 50 seconds, 1 minute. So make sure that the marker track, you may have to again right click to go to the track control settings. And then under the hidden controls, make sure that you have the toggle time base. And then once you have the toggle time base set to linear, those will stay locked to the particular SMPTE timecode values and not move based on tempo changes. And then you could also just lock markers so that, you know, if you want it, you couldn't move these as well. Okay, so we see a question. In the mix console on the right side of the fader, there is a scale from 0 to -50. How can I make the numbers more bright as it shows gray and it's hard to read? All right, so it's probably just right here. So what this is showing you is just going to be like the peak levels. So what most people want to see is the ability to see exactly at what dB value the fader is at. So that's going to be kind of more important than seeing the actual peak level set here, because, you know, this can constantly be changing. It could be kind of a bit of an eyesore. So that's why it's a bit more demure. But I could pass that along as a suggestion. I was just at a New England Conservatory a couple weeks ago, and that was a suggestion that they wanted as well, to have this kind of be more prominent or a way to brighten that up, but I'll pass it along again. Okay, so we just see a question. So I set up my project on the input stage with my EQ, compressor, gate, and mic pre. Once I close it out and start a new project, it disappears and I have to set it up all over again. So the input configuration will be stored with the particular project. So if I wanted to come over here to my audio connections and go to the inputs, these are the inputs that were set up from the engineer who did this particular project. So if you wanted to preserve all of the input channels, really all you need to do is, so let's say if I come here and I wanted to look at my input channels. All right. So let's say and I have my effects accordingly. Is just to save this as a template. So when I come over here, we'll save as template, and we'll just call this input mapping. Okay, so I'm going to close this particular project, and let's do a new project. And I'll go over here and we'll say input mapping as our template. We could choose our folder. And we'll activate the particular project. And then as we come over here, all of our input mapping is automatically has been preserved. So try just to, save it as a template. And if you wanted to always call that up, you just start from that particular template, and all the routing and dynamics processing that you've set up for your project will automatically be preserved. All right, so we have a question from Joel. Is there a way to darken the black note lanes in the MIDI editor window? I'm sure there used to be a way to do it. I need more contrast to see which notes are in which pitch. So let's go ahead to a particular project here. Let me just... All right, so I'll just... All right, so let's say we have some MIDI information here. All right, so is there a way to darken the black note lanes? So let's say we're looking at the MIDI editor. So I'm not sure if the lanes... Okay, so says I just need more contrast to see which notes are in which pitch. So I know, I'm not sure if I'm fully understanding, but I know what some people do, and I see a lot of composers that kind of have this set up. Is if we come over here to the color schemes, we could say the editor area background. So I'm just going to move this vertically up. So sometimes people will have it set like that. So as you know, just for more contrast, I think last time I was at Hans Zimmer's place, he just had his notes kind of all white. And he liked that particular view as well. So if I just want to go to defaults here, so maybe it's going over to, again, the preferences, to color schemes and editor area background. But maybe, Joel, if you could let me know if I'm misunderstanding. So it just says, so I need more contrast to see which notes are in which pitch. So let me know if that helps. All right, so we just see from Kai Wen Franklin in Wavelab, you have you seen the metadata fields you get when you work with an MP3 file? It'd be nice if we get that functionality in Cubase when working with MP3 files. Wavelab is very nice. So sometimes we could come over here. We could show you some stuff. I think, you know, there may be additional metadata that isn't read by a lot of other MP3 players. So let's say if I wanted to come over here and you could edit the ID3 tag. So, you know, here you could put in additional data. So this is generally what MP3 players will be able to read. Some programs will write additional metadata to files that can't be read by most MP3 playback engines. So I think, you know, Wavelab, you have a lot of additional metadata like, you know, AES cart and some other metadata formats. But, you know, but a lot of times that functionality and that metadata may not be actually be able to be read by most MP3 players. All right, so I just see I update today to Cubase 11, but MIDI preset menu still empty. How do I fix it? So I'm not sure if it's the logical editor presets. So if it's those particular presets, but many times what you could do if you still have your older version is try saving, go to your profile manager and actually export from the previous version and then import that into your version 11. They will be kind of showing up. I'm not sure if you're on Mac or PC. I have Mac set up here, but if I wanted to go to my Finder window, you could manually copy them over. So and sometimes if depends on if one version is not being run as admin and maybe the other one was. But I'm just going to go to my preferences. On the Windows, you'll have like the application data folder. But here I could go to library, to preferences, and then we'll just find Cubase 11. So all of these will be, so we'll find a presets folder. So you say the MIDI presets. So this is where kind of all of the different presets would be. So you could find this from Cubase 10.5, copy the presets, and then just kind of drag them over into the Cubase 11 folder. And that would probably do the trick as well. Okay, so you see how many VSTi we get with Cubase 11 Pro. So with 11 Pro, you're going to have, as far as included instruments, you'll get Groove Agent SE. You'll have Hallian Sonic SE. So I'll just kind of come over here just so you see. And you have Loop Mash, Mystic, Pad Shop, Prologue, Retrolog, and Spectre. So those are the instruments that come with Cubase Pro 11. And within Hallian Sonic, there's going to be kind of different instruments within that, but those are the different instruments. See, David Griffith says, just that changing of audio tempo trick is just amazing. 20 years of updates has certainly created a magical system. So ace. Yeah, it's really slick. Okay, so we just see on my laptop, I'm not able to export the mix down in WAV format because the button at the very bottom is hidden. So one of the things that you could do if you needed to, so you probably, Cubase will have a recommended display resolution. Not all laptops can do that, but let's say if we go to our export audio mix down, you can often, just come right over here. So if you see like the export queue that's active, you can hide the export queue, and that may be able to kind of resize the screen. But, if you could let us know, but there's definitely kind of like, suggested display resolutions that are helpful. And if you're running like a high DPI system on Windows, if you go to preferences, you could also just come over here under general and you'll see enable high DPI and then individual scaling. So you should be able to get it. Okay, so we see from Scott asking, I'm using Cubase 11 Pro and I have projects where I've got a 5.1 mix and a stereo mix and want to be able to use the 5.1 for in the studio, but also export the file to stereo. So a lot of times there's different schools of thought on this, but let's say if, so I know, a lot of the Chuck Ainlays and Frank Philippettis and Elliot Shiners will often, start with a stereo mix and then kind of build up to a 5.1 mix and often kind of have both of them within the particular project. The one thing you can do if we have this all being routed to, let's say a 5.1 bus. So I'm going to just add a 5.1 out. So many times people will kind of set up, 5.1 and stereo concurrently within a particular project. But let's say if I come over here to the routing, I'm going to select a number of tracks. Okay, so I could say I want these going to my 5.1 output, and I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option plus Shift, so they'll all go to my 5.1 out. And then sometimes people can also just send it parallel using the racks here. So you could say, okay, I wanted this to do direct routing. So maybe I wanted this all to, also in the direct routing for it to go out of the stereo output as well. So if we wanted to send it to both destinations, and when you do this, click here in this little arrow and make sure direct routing summing mode is on. So we could send all these tracks to the 5.1 and stereo bus. What many people will do, kind of a quick, if you have to do something dirty and you've pretty much done like the 5.1 mix, is on like your 5.1 mixed down track. We could come over here and just do surround, and you can say mix 6:2. And what this will do is when you do, this will take your 5.1 channels and automatically down mix it to stereo. So you could do one mix in 5.1 and then down mix it to stereo. Most people I know will do, have separate projects, separate mixes, or run kind of parallel 5.1 and stereo projects within one mix. So, and at this point you could say, I wanted to go to my export audio mix down, and I could say, okay, for this I wanted to export my, let's say we want to add this to the queue, and now I want it to come over here and add this, so this will be, let's say let me just get rid of these really quickly here. So I can say I wanted this to be my 5.1 mix, so I could add that to the queue. And now I wanted this to mix down my stereo file. So you could kind of work both projects concurrently. But, I know a lot of guys that do like, some of the top surround work. And a lot of times, like, especially if they're doing like recreating a record. I remember being, helping out Chuck when he was doing Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms in 5.1, which he won a Grammy for. That, first thing he did was he kind of built up the stereo mix to be as close to the original. And then he took that and then, had almost a stereo mix and then started doing a 5.1 mix, but he could just kind of have it done in one particular project where he could go back and forth and make sure he wasn't losing anything. So it could really depend on how you're setting it up, but a lot of people will treat it as kind of separate files. And once they have the stereo, they may save that as a stereo project and then start doing the 5.1. All right. Thanks for all the great questions. If you learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button. All right, so I just see, Greg, are all the loops, let me just find, my timeline just jumped on me. Okay, so from Kai Wen Franklin, are all the loops in Cubase that are from Steinberg in musical mode by default? I think a lot of the actual loops are, but maybe some of the content. So let's say if I wanted to come come over here, more of like a soundscape. So if I add that to a project, so I think a lot of these will automatically be in musical mode by default. So, and that's primarily, the purpose that people are kind of using loops so that they automatically fit in. So we see JVI just says, sound like I have a bit of a cold. So yeah, a little bit, but I feel fine. So, but my voice makes it sound worse. So sorry if it's annoying to listen to. All right, so we have Michael Pierce joining us today. Glad you can make it. And we have Lawrence from Rhode Island. Okay, so we see a question from JVI. Just says, in Groove Agent, loaded kit with pattern. I drag a pad to the project window, works great. But then when I play, I hear double notes and see the pattern pads being triggered. How to stop the play button. So, if we have our project here, okay, and let's say we're going to have our patterns. So, the first thing is to make sure, if we have this already kind of in play mode. So let's say if I'm here and I had the pattern going on. So now when I hit play, all right, so let's say if I drag this pattern over to the track, so, but Groove Agent could still be in play mode here. And if you have follow transport, make sure that's turned off. So now as I do this, you may notice that as we just kind of play back, that it's just going to play back the pattern. So we don't see the pattern turn on. So, but if I had this set to follow transport, this would play back its internal sequencer plus act as a tone module. And you may have kind of like flamming that you hear, but if you just make sure follow transport is turned off, and then when you hit play again, now it's just acting as a sound module. It's acting just as a tone generator that's playing the MIDI notes from here, as opposed to synchronizing its internal patterns directly from here. So make sure that when you're in the pattern mode, that you have this follow transport disabled, and that you have the stop sign turned and the stop on the internal transport on stop. Okay, so just the question, use a Behringer X-Touch with Cubase 11, and there's very little documentation or info that I can find. If I move a slider, it moves it to a different track. So it could be, many people run the Behringer. Basically it's probably working as a control. So as a control surface. So, one, it could be set up, I think you could change the modes where it's going to output like MIDI CC data. But the most common mode that people would use it for mixing tracks is going to be, if we come over here to your studio menu, to studio setup. And if I just click over here on the plus sign, you could add a Mackie control. And once you have the Mackie control, you can connect this right here, and then it should automatically kind of be mapped to the Mackie control protocol. So it could be that maybe when you have access to it, that It may not give you a lot of information on the Mackie control protocol. Many control surfaces will work that way. Excuse me, just one second. So many control surfaces will kind of automatically be in Mackie control, so they may not document it. But if you do research on Mackie control integration with Cubase, you could see all sorts of great information there. But try to set that up by hitting the plus sign and then the Mackie control. Okay, so I just see from Joel, it says, I have the colors a lot lighter in the MIDI editor. And I want the darker gray lanes to be even darker. So maybe this is with the controller lanes. So let me just see if we can adjust that. Sorry, did a wrong one. So I don't think, Joel, if you're looking to have the controller lanes here be darker, let me just, but you want the darker gray lanes to be even darker. So I'm not sure if it's in the like the MIDI CC editors, if you wanted that to be darker, but let's say if but I think that might be just automatically tied together. So let's take a look and see. And maybe you could confirm for me. Yeah, so I think that might be the same colors if that's kind of what you're looking for, Joel. It's great to see you on the live stream. Hope you're well. And I think that those, if it's the controller lanes, I think it's always been kind of the same color, but I could be mistaken. Okay, so we have a question. How can I get the results from a monitored track using a chord track, not via keyboard MIDI input to write the arpeggiator like Apache SX outputs into the monitored track? Okay, so let's take a look. Sorry, I'll use a different template. All right, let me just... Okay, so say I want to take that particular sound here. I want to add a chord track. Daryl Pearson calling me. Let me just... hang on just 1 second. I will just... Okay, so I'm going to add my chord track now. Okay, so I'll just come over here. So let's just listen to it. And okay, so now what I want to do is come over here. Let's add the arpeggio. Okay, and I'm just going to knock this up an octave or two. Okay, so now we have the chord track that's triggering the arpeggio. How to write the arpeggio, how to write the arpeggiator outputs into the monitor track. Okay, so I'm not sure if this will be captured over in real time, but we'll give it a shot because it may not be seeing. All right, so since we're not playing it, so what I would do is come over here. I'm going to select all of the events on the chord track here. And since it's not, so it'll play back kind of our live input. So if I want it to come here, I'm going to, so I'm going to just take all of these and drag them. And now at this point, so I could take all these events, and what I want to do now is I'll select them all, and we want to go to freeze MIDI modifiers because I think it needs to actually see kind of the data to record it. So let's say if I do a freeze MIDI modifiers, then when we just kind of play back, so as we listen to this now, so you may have to drag from the chord track up to the events, select all those events, go to the MIDI and choose freeze MIDI modifiers. And then that will take the arpeggiator that we have here and automatically apply that. So you could do it like that. I know it's not in real time, but I think if I, played and was sending MIDI to it in real time, that the Apache would automatically do. But since it's not seeing kind of a physical input from a MIDI device, that it doesn't work the same way. But I think that will get you there pretty easily. Okay, so we see question. In your opinion, what's the best synth in Cubase 11? So there's different flavors. So if you're looking for virtual analog, Retrolog is really hard to beat. If you were doing something that was going to be more sound design like, I would probably, check out Pad Shop. So if you wanted to, just kind of come over here, Pad Shop is a granular synth that comes with Cubase, but if you wanted to just kind of look at that, so if you're doing more kind of esoteric type of instrument sounds, where you could just so it could really depend on exactly what you want. This could be like a whole soundtrack with just one note that you play, where sounds could continually evolve. But if you're looking for a more traditional synthesizer, Retrolog will be like, 3 oscillators plus a noise and sub oscillator. But here I can So lots of great options between those two, but really, they're both amazing, but they're kind of just different flavors. So whatever type of flavor you're looking for, and if you're looking for, I want Rhodes and strings, Howley and Sonic is perfect for that. Okay, and I just see kind of further clarification for electronic music, D&B, so like for drum and bass, but yeah, definitely check out Retrolog for that. Okay, just my chat field jumped on me, so let me just find back. Okay, so we just see from Jay, says, excuse me, Greg, if you wanted to modulate panning dependent upon both pitch, say low frequency, left, high, right, and pan speed dependent upon instrument gain level, how would you? Okay, so let's say if I wanted to take something, let's say like this arpeggiated part here. Okay, so let's say you wanted low frequencies to be left, and so we could do, and especially if you have like the built-in Steinberg instruments. So let's say if I'm looking at this, they have VST 3.5. I think we could do this pretty easily, where, using kind of so let's say above, I wanted all notes above C4 to to pan hard left. Okay, so since we could do this on, let's take a look at the logical editor. So we're going to say we're going to transform type is equal to note. And we'll say that Value 1 we'll say is going to be bigger or equal to C4. And I think we could do this with the VST3 parameter. So say VST3 value operation. So I want to say set to fixed value. Okay, let me just see if I could select this first. All right, so I'm going to select all those notes. And let me just see if I could set this up for the VST3 note expression. All right, so see if we could do this. All right, let me just see if I could do this from note expression here. So let's say all right, seeing if I could do this for. All right, so if I just wanted to do this for. And let's come over here and say. So that now you could kind of set this up, or and let me just. So, you know, I think that you could come over here and select each one. So let's say while we do this and edit the panning, and say we want to edit the panning for all of these notes the opposite way. So you might be able to, let's see if that, let me me just see if it's still going through an arpeggiator of some kind. Yeah, that's not going to help. All right. So you could, and I'll just mute the chord track here. So if you wanted to just kind of select So you could kind of do it manually like that, and I may be able to work, if you want to send me an email, Jay, I could see if I can get a Project Logical or a MIDI Logical editor to kind of do that and automate that process. But, you know, once you select kind of all these notes, double click, and then maybe say, okay, in the note expression, go to pan and adjust there, and you want it to go the opposite way on these particular notes. So double click on one of them. So now, but you could kind of get it here, a little bit of the effect. So that's one approach to do it. Okay, so we just see, hi Greg, what's going on? Love all you do for us. Could you explain how to use Spectre, and the same for Mystic? So these are just kind of older synths. I haven't really explored them in a while. I think this was kind of, they've been in Cubase for a while. So let's say if I just wanted to come over here, and I think these were, I'm trying to remember the company that we did this in conjunction with. But, you know, as we come over here, you could see, you know, just some of the different key trackings. So if you want to set the level, different filter types. So you can have your envelope settings here. And then once you also want to look into Spectre, so these are all just kind of different synthesizers are kind of built in. So as you kind of want to. But, you know, so here you could have, I think, the two different waveform generators. So if you wanted to do your different oscillators. So if you wanted this a partial octave. So you could just kind of do different filters directly there. So, but yeah, you can just kind of play around with some of the presets. I'm not a synthesis expert and haven't used them in a while, but there's some really good ethereal patches and presets in there. Okay, so we just see when setting up colors on different tracks, how do I make a track black or white? So sometimes, you know, when you select a track, it may turn white just to kind of indicate that it is selected, to differentiate that. But if you wanted to come over here, you could change colors as well. So let's say if we go to the project menu, you can go to the project colors setup. And then if you just kind of double click, you could just say, okay, I want this more in the dark. So now if I wanted this particular track to be, black, you could do that. So once again, if you just go to kind of the project color setup, you could just say, okay, I want color 2 to be super white. So as we move all the way over here, so if I wanted to, have this particular track be white by color, you could change it and create your own color schemes like that. All right, so I just see a question. Can I optimize sound, cause better arrangement? So I'm not sure if it's, can like having a better arrangement optimize the sound. So, that's definitely will make your mixes sound better if the arrangements if your instrumentation isn't really fighting itself. So if you think about to a lot of what people would consider classic records, you'll notice that like the arrangements on Steely Dan stuff, which is always really highly regarded, is, I think a lot of times it sounds really great because they're very methodical with their arrangements, so that the piano player, like the Rhodes and the guitars weren't playing in the same exact voicing range. But that can make a huge difference. You notice that like really good bands, you could kind of, they'll kind of arrange themselves. If you think of like, the Funk Brothers, who did all the classic Motown tracks, all those guys played together so much that they kind of just would self-arrange, and the 3 guitar players are like, you go high, I go mid, you go low, and we won't get into the bass area, and we're not going to conflict with the piano. So, but if I misunderstood, let me know. All right, so we're also seeing just some further uh, discussion from JVI with his groove agent and the patterns. So if you find that you do have one other thing that you could check out JVI is sometimes people may inadvertently play patterns from Groove Agent when they're dragged in. So the trick is you may want to assign a separate unique pattern pad to Groove Agent. To do this, if you wanted to, if you still find it kind of playing patterns, come right here in the pattern pad and click on this little icon, and that will give the patterns their own MIDI port. And then when you drag in, see if that makes a difference, because sometimes you could drag in and some of the notes may also be used to trigger particular patterns, because all the patterns are just basically triggering notes. So this way the patterns will get their own MIDI port that doesn't interfere. So try just to come over here, turn this on. It's kind of a subtle thing. And then drag the pattern over if you're still hearing the patterns. If you don't have it set to like the transport set to play or into follow transport. Okay, so we just see a question. Is there a quick way to highlight multiple channels and 0 dB all faders for the selected channels? So let's take a look. All right, there's a couple different ways to approach this. Okay, so let's say we're in our mix console here and I wanted to zero out all the faders. So I could select all of my faders. So I want to take all these channels. So they're all selected and I wanted to 0 dB them. So if I come over here, I could turn on quick link, and then you have kind of, where you could have suspend or absolute linking. So as I come over here, I could just hold down control or click or control or command and that will automatically, so if it's set to, not to absolute value, so, what this will do is, and as I enable quick link for all the selected channels, it'll move them all proportionally. But if I just want it to come here, I can put on the absolute mode, and then holding down control or clicking on one channel, holding down control will move that channel to 0 dB, the default value. So just hold down control or command and click, and all faders that you selected in quick link and absolute mode will just immediately jump back down to, will immediately move to 0 dB. All right, so we just see a question for anyone. What's the shortcut key to go back and forth from a separate mix window back to the project window? F3 closes the mix window, and I want it to stay open. So a lot of times you may just come over here. So let's say if I have this set to, where I hit F3, and F3 will always just kind of go to a particular mix window. But if I wanted to just switch the active window, if you just go to Windows, so you could, at this point, one method would be just to, I think if you just, just clicking in a particular window would make it the active window. So let's say if I'm here, now that's the active window. And if you, depending if you have this, especially on multiple screens, whatever kind of the active window is, and let's see if there's just a quick key command to go to next window. But you could also set it up for workspaces, so set a new workspace and do this. But if you have it on different screens, which is a pretty common thing, a lot of people will have their mix console on one window and maybe the project window on a different one, then whatever you kind of click in will make it the active window. But if you want it to disappear, you could just kind of hit F3. But you could, let's say if I wanted this to be, go to my workspaces, I could say, let's come over here and say add workspace. So I'll do this to my project window. So I'll just say, okay, project. And now I just wanted this to, so if you wanted to just, have keyboard shortcuts to go back and forth between like your main window and your mix window, you could do that. But if they're kind of both open simultaneously across different screens, as soon as you just click in one area, that will make it the active window. But let's say if I just come over here and yeah, so you could just kind of tab between the different elements, but try just setting up a workspace. All right, so we have when you play your track and while playing you add a VST, does the music stop? So, you know, what Cubase is doing, so say if I'm here and I wanted to add a plugin, so say, okay, I want to come here and add a brick wall limiter. So what is going to happen is the plugin, you know, while you add the plugin does the, you know, it's automatically shifting the playback of the track so that as soon as the plugin is instantiated, that the track is playing back in time. So that's why you kind of can sometimes hear that little bit of gap, is because when the plugin is added, a lot of programs may actually just choose to have the tracks play out of time until you hit stop, and then it will do the delay calculation, but Cubase will do the delay calculation as the plugin is being added. All right, so we see Cedric is checking out because it's really late in India. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question from Bill Vincent. Hi, Greg. Question: can you explain the proper way to add an external synth patch name file so that the patch names show up when I use it on a track? So if you've downloaded like a patch name script, you can come over here, and we're in the presets earlier. So let's say I just want to go to a new Finder window. So let's say, and this, you could do it from kind of the start menu on Windows and go to Cubase, and you'll see the application data folder on the Mac platform. You need to go to the library, to preferences, and then you'll see the Cubase 11 preference here. And we go to, I think it's under presets. Let's see if it's under presets here. But I think you could see kind of the actual scripts. So if you go here into the preferences folder, you'll see your patch name scripts. So if it's where you've downloaded it, you could copy it into the inactive text file. So these are all the different text files that you could have for that. If you need to create one from scratch, all you have to do in Cubase is come over here to your studio menu, to more options, to your MIDI device manager. And let's say, okay, I wanted to do new device. So we'll say install device, define new. You could define what MIDI channels you want to use. So let's say, okay, it's going to be for my JD800. Okay, so I'll come over here and we see the JD800. Let's open the device, and then you'll see patch banks, and then you could enable, so you could now come over here, create a bank, and then you could just kind of start typing in different patch name scripts if you wanted to. So at this point, you could just come over here and just start editing preset names as well. But a lot of times you can find different different manufacturers have done it. I know a lot of Yamaha instruments are available to download as well. Okay, so we just see how can you make the controller lane in a separate window, asking for a friend. Okay, so I think the controller lane is always going to be tied to the MIDI editor, but let's take a look, see if there's any way. All right, and just okay. So if we have our controller lane here, so let's say, okay, so let's say if I have modulation, and I just want it to. All right, so let's say if I have this, so I don't think. Yeah, so I don't know of a way to kind of decouple that from the editor. So the two are generally pretty universally always have direct correlation with each other. So most people haven't would find it a bit awkward to do MIDI edit, controller editing and not see it here. I guess if you really had to, you might be able to, hide or minimize the piano roll part of the editor, but I don't know of a way to decouple it from the piano roll. It's always kind of part of it. All right. So we see let me just read this real quick. Is there a way to pass MIDI out of any VST instrument so I could send to another instrument track? I could do it with things like Scalar, but I'd like to pass it through Analog Lab. So if we come over here, and if we start with a MIDI track, so let's say if I come to my VST instrument rack here and I want to add an instrument rack. So let's say I wanted this to be retro log. Okay, so I will come over here. Let's just find a quick pad sound. All right, so let's say I have this sound. And let's say I have another instrument rack. So it doesn't work with instrument tracks, what I'll show you, but if you do MIDI tracks going to instruments, we could do this. So I'm going to add, let's say, a pad shop preset. Okay, so what I want to do now is I can take this pad shop, and let's say I have a retro log. And if I wanted to layer those two together, we could come over here to MIDI sends, and MIDI sends are only on MIDI tracks and not instrument tracks. I'm not sure if there's a technical reason why, but at this point I could say I want this, any MIDI that I send to this particular track will go to retro log and pad shop simultaneously. So if I want to, again, look at pad shop, I could come over to this particular instrument. Excuse me. So now we could have both retro log and pad shop. Let me just. So now I can just play this one particular instrument and have both instruments sound. So that way I could take MIDI, go into a virtual instrument and send it through MIDI sends to up to 4 additional sources. Okay, so just saying from JVI about the Groove Agent. So just says file transport is off and still there are multiple hits. So restarted the PC, reloaded new Groove Agent track, still the same. So again, once with your Groove Agent, come over here and try it in the patterns just to make sure that this is turned on and activate it before dragging the pattern over. All right, I think my chat field just jumped on me, so let me just find my place. Sorry about that. Okay, so found my spot. Thank you. Thanks for all the great questions. If you have learned anything, make sure you do hit the like button. Okay, reading through more comments. So thanks for all the great discussion. All right, we see Alexander from Moscow. Thanks for joining. Okay, so we just see a question, how to export scores to PDF. Is it possible I can only save them as JPEG, or have I missed something? So, you know, both Windows and Mac, if I wanted to look at the score, you know, so when we go to export scores, you know, if I wanted to do something like in more like a desktop publishing program, you know, where we want to deal with one page at a time to, you know, maybe, you know, graphically design stuff, that's what the export scores is for. So when you do an export scores from this window, you know, you'll see that you can, all right, so you will see kind of like the different, you know, we'll see our file formats here. So at this point, if we wanted to do this, so I'm sorry if you click and it's not there, but there is. just going to do it from a new location here. Trying to remember where we could set the... Okay, so right here at the bottom, you could just set it to PDF document, but that would do one page at a time. That's the intention. But if you want it to take a whole score and generate a PDF, just go to print. And then we see like no printer selected. Both Mac and PC will allow you to print to PDF. So as soon as I come here, we'll say score PDF. And now when I come over to, let's say, my Finder window, let's go to recent. I think I just put it in documents. But that would be all that you would need to do to just do that. So just do the... so just do, the print instead of the export. But if you wanted to do one page, when you do the export scores, you'll be able to select different image formats there. But just do a print and print it and create a PDF file just through the print driver. All right, so let's reading through more comments. So thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we see Mandy Lane on the live stream. Thanks for joining. Okay, so I just see a question from Andy Lane. Says, I'm working on a remake, but get confused when there are so many tracks and layers and need to glue the whole thing. So, something that may help, like if you have lots of different layers and tracks. So say we have just a gazillion different edits and different stuff is layered on top. And let's say maybe you're having just... So sometimes what people, will do if you're doing a lot of complex edits, and you're afraid that everything is going to get kind of messed up, is just, so say we have lots of different layers and I wanted to clean this up, is just come over here. And I think you may have the Elements version, but I think in Artist and Pro, you have track versions and you may have it in Elements, but we could say duplicate version. So now that I'm doing this, I could do all sorts of edits. And let's say, okay, I just want to clean this up. I have like my fades, and everything is kind of as expected. So, but now I could just kind of come back here if I needed to go back to the original or just to work with my edits, I could do that. So if I needed to go back to square one, so even if I just want to go to this track version and say, okay, I've done all these edits, I could duplicate this version. And then I could just come over here and say, let's bounce selection. So we'll just come right over here. So we're going to bounce the selection. This will now be one contiguous part. This will be all of my edits, and this will be the raw file. So you could just kind of work with kind of alternate edits using track versions as well. So that's a really kind of a clever way of working if you needed to go back or a client changes their mind frequently. So it's an easy way to do that. Okay, so we just see, why is it not possible to choose tensions in the chord editor? All right, so often when we come over here, let's say we have a chord pad. I'm going to add just a quick instrument channel. Okay, so let's say now if I, all right, so let's say if I want to go to tensions, all right, so really all you have to do is, let's say we add a chord track here. And so if I wanted to add tensions, I could say, okay, let's just have this kind of play back. So as I audition my different chords. So there's lots of different tensions that you could add there. Now, sometimes when you're doing this, you may want to set up voicing. And if you don't see other tensions, it might be that when you go to set up voicing, that you only have triads that are available. So let's just say if I have that set up and I go to add different tensions now, but so you may have kind of different tensions depending upon the voice for the particular one, but you could definitely add tensions using the chord track. Okay, just reading through comments. So you see Cubase Junkie just saying Steely Dan is the greatest of all time, legends. So yeah, I got to work with Donald Fagen for a couple days in his apartment, just one-on-one, which is a lot of fun. And I even got to do all of their transfers of their analog mixes for like a later compilation we did in Nuendo at 32-bit, 176.4K. So it was cool to be involved with that. Okay, so we have a question. Are you able to have folders automatically route tracks within them to a group bus of your choice? So, if so we could think of the folder as being more, organizational, like, more for organizing within the main project window. But let's say if I wanted to come here and I have all of my drums, let's say, outside of the folder. So I'll just go ahead and delete this track. Okay, so if I wanted to assign these to a folder, it's really kind of the folder doesn't have any audio routing capabilities, or the folder doesn't have a signal path, so there's no gain structure, there's no summing on a folder. It's just really for organizing, but there is a macro that's included. So if I wanted to come here, and this is one of the macros that is included, so we could just say selected tracks to new folder and add group channel. So once I run that macro from the edit menu, I can just say, okay, we're going to put this in our drums. I give my folder and my group a name, and then everything is being sent directly to the drum bus. So we could just have our drum bus here. So as we're playing everything, all my drums can be bus, but we could think of the tracks as having like an audio destination, but the folder's not. But you could easily select all of the tracks within the folder and right click and add group channel to selected channels as well. So, but if you wanted to kind of put them in a folder and add it to a group simultaneously, just go to edit to macros and then selected tracks to new folder and add group channel. All right, so I just see a jazz dude says, I remember a video of an Israeli composer using some kind of chord gimmick when he moved his hands going through chord pads and versions fluently. Sounded great, all live, not edited video. So yeah, that's just like the little, I forget what the name, it wasn't by Korg, it was actually more for gaming, but it was like a little touch sensor, and you could move your hand in the air vertically or horizontally, and Cubase would automatically use that to change different parameters. So you could do transport as well. I haven't used one in a long time. I don't even know where mine is anymore, but I used to have one. And I think Roland had something similar. See, Bill Vincent is eating year-old candy from Sweetwater. So that's my goal for my son's Halloween candy. We still have a lot left, so we're proud that we've been hiding it well from him. Okay, so we see, hello, is there a way in the MIDI editor to use the brush or draw tool, but only gives you the note on quantization? So let's go ahead and take a quick look. So if you want to do it from like the key editor, if you just grab the paintbrush tool, so there's different drawing tools, but if you wanted to just grab the paint tool, so if I have that set to eighth notes, as I draw it in, it would automatically quantize it. If I want that to quarter notes, or let's say to whole notes, so whatever your quantized value is set to here, you could just kind of draw it in. And if you don't want it to, sorry, it's annoying. If you don't want it to if you only want it to be on a single pitch, just hold down the control key. So let's say if I want to do eighth note triplets or quarter note triplets, I could now just hold down a control key, and then it will lock it to that particular pitch as you paint in. So a couple of little tricks you could do there with that. So let me know if that works for you. Okay, so we have a question. I would like to be able to affect the velocity of notes found only on the beats. Okay, so let's say I'll come over here, and let's say I want to do it with hi-hat. So in this track, I want it to come, and I'll just create a quick drum map from the instrument. Okay, so let's say if I want to do this for hi-hats, which is pretty typical. So let's say, okay, and let's say I'll just throw in hi-hats here. Okay, so I will just come over here. So if I only want it to be notes on the beat, so let's say I have all the velocities here, but every note that's on the beat, I wanted the velocity to be a fixed value. So we could come to the logical editor, and we want to say we're going to transform, type is equal to notes, and we'll say its position, and then we're going to say is inside bar range. Okay. And I'll just do this for each of the beats. Position, inside bar range. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just say we want to take value 2, which is going to be our velocity, and I want it to set to a fixed value, and I want that to be 100. Okay, so now, so what I'm doing is I'm telling it to take notes that are in these bar ranges and to give it a velocity of 100. If I did it correctly. Oh. So, and I just set the Boolean condition here to OR. So once again, we're going to say transform MIDI notes that are in a position around beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4. So we're going to say inside bar range, and you can just kind of grab it with your mouse. And then we want to say value 2 is set to a fixed value. We set to random values between 90 and 110. So now if I want to do that, we could have the first, the notes on the beat accented, or we could, do control like that. So let me know if that works for you. All right, so we see that clicking on the little drum icon did the trick for JVI, so thanks for letting me know. All right, and that's why we kind of do these live streams, so you can figure out all these little tricks. Okay, so we just see from Jeff Sapelski says, my Bluetooth is mono when I'm on laptop. I have to touch it and move it to the left to pan it. So So I'm not sure if you're using Bluetooth to monitor through on your laptop. So if you know, if you could avoid doing that, you know, because there's usually just all sorts of added latency, and it may not be showing you kind of the, you know, representing the different frequency ranges accurately. And some may be set in mono depending on your audio interface settings as well. All right, just reading through comments, and my chat field jumped on me. Okay, so I think I'm close. All right. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to extend an event to the cursor? We can trim to cut, but the same way to extend. All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's say my cursor is here. Sorry for hitting my mic. Okay, let me just take a look, see if there's... Let's just see if this... You look through maybe the key commands and see. Right, so say if I come here. Yeah, I don't know of a way to do that, but maybe if you could tell me if there's a reason that you want it to extend the event, you know, maybe I could come up with something. But let's just say I have this. Let me just change one. Yeah, I don't know a way of doing that, but if you tell me if there's a specific situation that you want it to do, but you can probably just move this and have it snap to the cursor. So if you wanted to take this particular event and say, okay, we want this to automatically snap to the cursor. So let me just see if there's a snap extend to cursor or snap cursor. So if you have that on, I don't know of a key command to do it, but if I just wanted to come here, I could just extend that out and we could have that automatically snap directly to the cursor position. So let me know if that's helpful, but I don't know of a keyboard shortcut to do that. And that's one of the grid modes. All right, so we see from Kaiwen Franklin, it says, Greg, this might be off topic. I don't know if you're familiar with Scalar, but I can use that VST with MIDI Insert and MIDI Send. So I don't think that the Scalar is going to be a MIDI plugin. So I don't think that's going to be a MIDI plugin, but, you know, Cubase already has quite a bit of, you know, functionality. So let's say if we're in... You know, so you might not need to use Scalar. So let's say if I have an instrument track here and I've just created a part, you know, if you're using it for, you know, scale correction, you could also just say snap live input and set your scale here. And that way, you know, if I'm in, so let's say I'm in D major and I just wanted to put in, you know, like a chromatic run, like a harp run. I could say, okay, I just want to put in 30-second notes. I could move. Let's say I click here with my timeline. So now I could just like grab my keyboard. I'm just going to move my hand. And, you know, once we have, you know, that way you could just kind of even do live input, you know, using the editor scale. So, you know, but I don't think it'll work as Scalar, and I'm not familiar with it, but I don't think it'll work as a MIDI plugin inside of Cubase, but you could probably do it already with some of the included functionality. You see Jazz G mentioning that it works like a virtual instrument instead. All right, so we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Great for you to be able to join us. I think the virtual ice cream will commence. All right, we have Chris Hallam checking in from Columbia, South Carolina. Thanks for being a part of the live stream. Okay, so I just see a question. Cubase shows a pop-up error whenever I render audio. It freezes entire project and quits Cubase sometimes. I've searched on Steinberg forum about this and got no clarity. Do you have any idea on this? So usually when I hear something like this, it's going to be a third-party plugin that is the culprit. So if you have the possibility to, you know, see if you bypass all of the plugins, if it does it, and see if you know, then maybe bypass any third-party plugins. But I bet that you'll find that it'll be one particular plugin that's causing it. So. Kaiwen Franklin's going to do a remote thing while he's at work. We won't tell anyone. All right, still reading through multiple comments here. We see that Michael Teams lost some friends this week, so sorry to hear that. You'll be my thoughts. Okay, so we have a question. What's the best way to unload some DSP processes from the CPU, but keeping as much editing options as possible? So if it's going to be, for a virtual instrument. So let's say if I just want to do a quick new project. And let's say I have my piano that's totally killing everything that I'm working on. All right, so I'll just get kind of a... Okay, so I'm just going to add a quick instrument track here. All right, so if I wanted to be able to easily edit and still kind of have access, to all of the different functions, I think render in place makes sense for that. So let's say if I'm just looking and we're playing this, and let's say this is killing my CPU. So if I wanted to select the track, I think what's the most flexible is, try not to select the event, but select the track. And as I come over here, I'm going to do just my edit menu to render in place. And at this point, I could choose to include my effects if I wanted to, but we could say source tracks, which is like the original track. I could just choose to disable the source track. So I'll say render. And now it's going to render that file, place it directly underneath. This track is now disabled automatically. So it's not going to take any computer's memory or RAM. And if you needed to come over here and just do a quick edit, you could just right click and enable track. And then you could move stuff and, choose to refreeze if necessary. So I think that selecting the track and doing, disabling the source track after the render, immediately will free up your CPU resources, but still keep it there so that you could tweak if necessary. See, Kyron Franklin is just talking about the Roland Phantoms. I think the feature where you can move your hand is going to be the D-beam, but I'm trying to remember what the little third-party one is, more kind of multimedia AI stuff that you could. I think you could still use it with Cubase, but I haven't seen one in a long time. Right, reading through more comments. Seeing some discussion of older keyboard workstations like the Kurzweil K2500 and Phantom and Motif. Okay, still reading through. So we see people like the Motif and a Korg. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. So if you haven't done that, make sure you do it in an odd number of times. So if you do it twice or 4 times, you cancel out your like. So all right, we see Gareth has made the live stream. We see, hi Greg, this is from Gareth. Hope you're well. Has Ryan, this is my son, has he taken over as managing director of Steinberg yet? So no, but he has some good ideas for an 8-year-old. So maybe one day. I'll be prepping him to take over my job if he wants it. I'll get him all trained up. But he probably won't want to do what I do. Like I did do what my dad did. So. Okay, so Gareth has indicated that Michael Teams is famous, so that's good to know. We have Michael Teams be our special guest Zoom meetup celebrity in 2 weeks, a week and a half. Okay, so we see a question from Jay, just saying, I'm a bit curious as to whether you ever crossed Trent Reznor or even, I think, Atticus Ross as clients. If so, Trent wrote the live stream Q&A, my head would probably burst. I haven't had any interactions with them, so I'm not sure if they're using our software or not, but I haven't really had interactions with them. So, but maybe other people have, rather. Okay, so we see Jeff Sabelsky was joking about his mono Bluetooth, so. Okay, so I see from Keith Young, Greg, have created a great groove using Groove Agent 5 using 3 kits over 3 MIDI channels. Can I render all 3 into one channel to use less CPU? Thank you. All right, so we'll show you how to do this. All right, so let's say I'll add an instrument track. And we'll have 3 different groove agents here. All right, just finding our kit here. Okay, and I'll load up one more. Okay, so let's say I wanted to create just a quick. Sorry, just give me a second. Okay, so let's say I wanted to use maybe a kick from one. We just find something a little different here. Okay, so let's say right. Sorry, it's taking a while to get this set up, but I think we're almost there. Just gonna take this off step input mode. All right, so. Okay, so let's say, all right, sorry, it's obnoxiously loud. All right, so let's say this is going to be our kit that we have 3 different groove agents. So we'll have, let's say, kick, snare, and kind of a synth sound. So let's see if I wanted to take these and do a render in place. All right, and then we could just come over here, we could keep the channel settings, and I'll say mix down to 1 audio file. So we'll give it a name, we'll say 3 groove agent. So select the events. You can give it a custom name and then hit render. And now kind of all the different sounds from 3 different drum kits will be just kind of rendered in one particular file. So once you have those particular files, select it, go to edit to render in place, and then choose to mix down to 1 audio file. And then you could take the 3 different grooves and make 1 new audio file out of it. All right, so you see David M. on the live stream. Thanks for joining us. So we see Jay is just mentioning he has a name. So the hand controller is Delete Magic. So that's the one. Thanks, Jay, for remembering that or Googling it. Seems like they were everywhere, kind of, and I haven't seen one in a couple years. All right, so we just see, Greg, can there be a notepad for folder channels? I don't think that there is one, but I'll just make sure. So let's say if I want to take all of these and put them to a new folder. Yeah, so I don't think that there is one. I could mention it as, but I'll just make sure I'll go to the track control settings and see if there is one. So we do, so there isn't, but there is kind of a global notepad in the project. So maybe you could come over here. So let's say if you go to the notepad, maybe you could just say, group 1 and make whatever notes that you wanted to for groups and store that within the project. But I'll mention that. Thanks for the suggestion. Reading through more comments. Okay, so we have a question. So it says, can Greg discuss Simon Phillips' jazz drum and how to modify a pattern, for example, 2/4/4? Thanks. And it's from Jan, so let's go ahead and take a look. Yeah, so a lot of the patterns, you could see the time signature here. So there's a number of them that are in 6/8, and you can see which ones are in 4/4. But let's say if I wanted to do like a 6/8 brush, and let's say if we wanted to modify this to be in 4/4, we can give it a quick stab and take a look at it. Okay, so let's say I drag this out in our meter. Okay, so now if I wanted to play this in 4/4, it's probably not going to make too much sense with a click track. And let me modify the okay, and I had to drag it into the one project that was already set in 6/8, so okay. Okay, so I'm going to set this to 4/4. So even if you wanted to, double click, so say, if I wanted to just take like what was the first 4 beats of that, even if I wanted to duplicate that, so I'll just hit Control D, that would kind of work. So, when switching meters, there isn't necessarily a way to automatically take a 6/8 pattern and drop it in 4/4 starts. So you could kind of modify, patterns like that and be able to kind of chop it up. Or, as you look at the particular patterns, you may be able to have it have less of an emphasis on on 4/4, and you realize that eventually so like even if I wanted to just kind of take this, like, these particular notes, let's say, I'll do it in the in-place editor quickly. But even like if I want to take the range tool, just coming over here and selecting let's say even the range tool and duplicating, you might be able to come up with but there's no kind of automatic way to take a pattern that was programmed in one meter and have it automatically kind of coalesce to a different meter. But if you're working with the Simon Phillips Jazz drums, come over here, like when you go to load up the kit with the patterns and slide over, that when you do this, you'll see one of the actual criteria will be the signature, so you could find a 4/4 patterns versus 6/8 quite easily, so you don't kind of get into problems later. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. All right, see how I'm doing on time. So not too bad, about 7 minutes. I'm trying to catch up. So you see we're at 99 likes, and this a couple minutes ago, so if you haven't hit the like button, make sure you do. So just seeing, I think from Cubase Junkie, I've seen it's kind of spread across different threads, but I think over the discussion, but how to put your own folders into Media Bay or your own loops. So one way of doing it is just going to kind of the file browser. And if you have a folder of different drum loops, so let's say this is your drum loop folder, that all you'd have to do is right click and you could say add favorite, give it a name, say, okay, this is my loops. And now when I come over here, I could just go home and I say go to favorites. And now I could just say, okay, let's find our loops. And I could find all the files. If you need to kind of automatically find folders that you defined as favorites, you could do that and incorporate those into Media Bay quite easily. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so we have a question from Gareth. If I wanted to export Vox bus acapella via a mix bus to stereo out with send effects, then the mix bus as a bed without the Vox, can they both be queued up for multiple exports? So if you, depending how you have everything routed, so let's say if I'm over here, just revert this. So a lot of people may set up like a pre-master group, or a group that has everything except like let's say in this case I wanted to do drums, and then I wanted everything except drums. So I could take my drum folder here, and I'm going to select all my drum tracks. I'm going to create a group channel to the selected channels. So we'll call this drums. And let's say I wanted another folder, another group that's just everything except drums. So I add a group channel to the selected. So we'll say all sans drums. Okay, so let's say now all my drums. So I have my drums group and I have my bass. So, and let's say if I have my drums going through their own effects, so I'll add a effects channel track to these. So say, okay, now I want it to have way too much reverb. So when I go to export, I could say, let's do our export audio mix down. I could say I want to do a single and I wanted to do drums. And then let's see if we could. Okay, let's choose multiple, and I'm going to choose drums. And then we'll say I wanted to have the effects. So I'm going to click on Add to Queue. And now I want it to have everything except for the drums and add that to the queue. And let's say as we do this, so what I want to do for both of these is I want, before I do that, let me just, after the export for each of these, I want it to create an audio track. Okay, so we'll add that to queue. Let's come over here, and let's create an audio track to that. So now I say start queue export. All right, so I will have, sorry, I did interleave files. Let me just redo that one more time, sorry. So we'll do interleaved. All right, so we'll do just a small portion of it. So now I should have my drums and the guitars and bass. So if they're routed to their different groups, and you may have to, like on that particular, let me just see. So like we didn't get the effects on the reverb. Let's come over here, and like I didn't hear the reverb. So we could route the reverb to the drums group as well, but let me just try one more time and see if we do our drums. So we'll say, okay, we're going to do groups and send. So we'll add that to the guitars, and let's do our drums. And let's see if we choose this to be master. Sorry, I forgot to export, but you could kind of get the sense. But here, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Let me just. Okay, so we'll do drums, and I'm going to choose to do master, and we'll see if that's included. If not, we may have to route the reverb to the group bus. Okay, so let's see if the reverb is. All right, so to include the reverb, I may have to route the reverb into the drum group. So I'll try that one more time to see if we get the reverb going on. So I want to take this. This channel here, and I'll just route this also to my drum group. So I think I could even just do it at the same time. All right, and so now that we routed the reverbs to the same group, so that's how you could kind of do. I know it could be a bit of an awkward workaround, but you could do it. So depending if you set up how you set up your groups and your routing, you could do it pretty easily, Gareth. Sorry, it took a while to get there. All right, reading through more comments. Okay, reading through more comments here. So about different patterns in Groove Agent. Okay, so I see my misunderstanding about Groove Agent drum loops and putting them in Media Bay. So sorry about that. Okay, still reading through comments here. All right, so I just see what's that crazy reverb thing going on? So that reverb is a Yamaha reverb plugin. So it's probably this one, the Rev X, and you get this with like if you have a UR interface, but it's kind of a legendary Yamaha reverb that comes with that. So once you have the interface, you could work. This is powered by the UR series or AXR series audio interfaces, but it could also, you get a native version to use as well. So it's not included with Cubase, but if you're a UR user, it is. All right, so I got a revelation on Gareth, so I feel my job is complete for today. All right, and according to Michael Teams, Gareth is now famous, so that's good to know. According to Cubase Junkie, he's the best guitar player I've seen that uses Cubase. I've gotten to see some pretty good ones, so I got to work with Alan Holdsworth for a couple days, so that didn't suck. And discussing what guitar players scare Alan Holdsworth, that was interesting, so I won't share. All right, so we have a question. How do you do this line where you separate the top section of the project from the bottom? Is this possible in Cubase 11, or is this function already available in Cubase 10.5? So it is available in Cubase 10.5. So there is a divide track list feature. So this would allow us to have, like, particular tracks at the top. So let's say I'll be the selfish bass player and I want to have the bass track always visible and have all my other tracks, or maybe like a lead vocal where I could scroll up and down. And the trick to doing it is, you'll see in this little upper right hand corner, right below this little drop down menu, you'll see this little, like, a slash. So if I do this, all my tracks would just kind of scroll up and down and tracks could disappear. But if I click on that little icon, that's the divide track list. Now we could have tracks that are resident in the top, and we could scroll up and down and have divided track lists. So if you always wanted to see markers, if you always wanted to see, a particular track, you can, tempo, you could always have that visible on top, and that won't scroll. You could scroll within the divided track list, but that's how you do it. So, and to get rid of it, you click here. So just where you see this little slash, click there or click there to turn it off or on. So we'll give you that feature free for watching the live stream today. So I see some more discussion on the Yamaha RevX. So it is DSP. The plugin is DSP that comes, that's built into the audio interface, but it's also just a native software plugin as well. But it's a wonderful sounding reverb plugin. Gareth is going to toast me with wine because I gave him a revelation, so it's good. So just see from Jazz Dude, he's just saying Alan Holdsworth is a very humble guy. Rest in peace. So yeah, he definitely was. I was like a huge fan of his stuff, especially kind of starting with Bruford. But yeah, it was just, and he always felt like really bad calling me with Cubase questions because he wasn't so technical. And I'm like, anyone who plays guitar like you don't have to be good at anything else in life. So but he was incredibly humble, and I miss talking with him. All right, so I think I'm caught up. I know we had a couple of questions that were sent in, so let me get to those. Okay, so I think I when I was doing the index from the last live stream, I think I misunderstood this particular question. So let me open up a project to show it here. All right, that was in my recent projects list, but I'll just get it. All right, so the question was how to associate a chord track with a particular MIDI track. Okay, so, so let's say if I'm auditioning chord tracks, one of the ways is we could just choose to monitor. So we could say, use monitored tracks. So if I'm auditioning chords, I can come up here, and now as I play, let me just... So if we could so if I come here, I'll just put in a quick chord part here. All right, so now we could have this automatically use monitor track. So if I have this set to monitor, then we will just kind of hear the chord track kind of auditioning directly through here. So as we have this on now, so if I wanted to have another track, I could enable another track and have that particular track monitored. So that's how we could associate it. Now, the question could also be like, how do I take particular tracks? So let's say if I have maybe kind of more of a hip hop type of production. So if I wanted to take MIDI tracks, I could take like this piano part, and let's say if I just type in chords. So let's say we'll be in G. We could have these tracks automatically kind of change, based upon the actual part. So if I come in here and let's say if I look at the MIDI parts here, the notes, and I switch it to D, you'll see that as I do this, the tracks, we could have these tracks automatically update based upon the chord track. And how we set that up is when you select the track here, you go into the chords, and we could say follow chord track right from the chord inspector. And here we could, if it's set to off, it won't follow. But if it's set to, let's say, chords, it will automatically follow. And why would you want to have that? So your drums, let's say if I have just a quick, drum pattern going on, I may not want the drums to follow the chords because then my kick and snare is playing, two tom-toms. So those notes you may not want to automatically follow the chords. And so this way you could pick and choose which tracks actually follow the chords just by going into the chord settings and activating chords right there. Okay. So we had another question mailed in. I want to know if there's any way where we can open automation track of any knob or fader just by selecting them. Furthermore, is there any way to copy the current value of the fader or knob without writing the automation? All right, so let's say if I have a plugin on this particular track. So let's say I wanted to go to my delay. Let's do maybe a filter instead. So I'll come over here to my filter and okay, so let's say we want to do like a tone. And I wanted to automate a particular parameter. So to find, most of I know that the built-in plugins, I think it's part of the VST3 specification. If I wanted to, open up the automation parameter for a particular plugin, that all I have to do is right click, and then you could say show bass cutoff automation track. And then that opens up directly there. And I just see, is there any way to copy the current value of the fader or knob without writing the automation? So let's see if I have this set to 32. So let's say, so right now it will keep that value for that parameter directly there. So it hasn't written the automation, but that's where the value is. But it shouldn't, if you want it to be static, you just would have it not read existing automation back. See if that would work for you, but try, right clicking. Not every plugin developer does this, but it is part of the VST3 specification where you could just right click and have it automatically show up, and have that parameter show up in the automation, just like so. Okay, so we had just kind of a question on retrospective record. So let me get this kind of set up with a new project here. All right, so okay, so it says I was playing along to Groove Agent jam mode. So Kit was playing continuously, but the project was not playing. I'll refer to this as piano 1. I stopped Groove Agent, just started playing the piano by itself. So I'll refer to this as piano 1. Okay, so let's say okay, so let's say I'm here and I'm just playing along. Okay, so I'm going to put this into MIDI retrospective record. All right, so we see that event there. Okay. Okay, and then it says I stopped and started playing the piano by itself. So let's say, okay, so let's say now I'm just here. All right, and I'm gonna put this into retrospective record on the 2 parts. Okay. So that, and says, and no, there are not different lanes. Okay, so we see that we have kind of 2 parts that are stacked on top of each other. Okay, and we see, so I will kind of double click on the events here so we could see kind of two different parts. Okay. Okay, so on his, he may have had this set up to be in merge. So let me set this up again in merge and see if that behaves differently, because when the screenshot they shared, it was just showing the one part. So here I could double click and I could see, just look at this as velocity only. Okay, and when I wanted to come here, I could switch to the different part. So I'm going to just duplicate this and see if I record two different parts, and if the merge is, if it's in merge mode where both of the parts will be there. So there it's going to be set to two different takes as I just did it. All right, so I'm going to come over here and I'll just play a couple of notes, and I'm going to set my so let's see if I set this to merge, and we'll retrospective record that in. All right, and now I'll do something lower. Okay, so now we double click. So, so I think what the question was asking, that both of these seem to be, when doing retrospective record. So I'm not sure if you're doing, and let me see if I could read down a little bit. So as if you look carefully, you can see bar 68. So we see both piano bars. So the question was how to separate the two pianos. So one thing that you could try is on the event itself is you see this little drop down menu. Now you could double click and see like the active part. So you can say, I wanted this take, and then you could separate just like that. But, check your MIDI record modes, and I think this is from JVI, but these are how my MIDI record modes are set, whether I did new parts or merge. It seemed to kind of behave the same way, but I'm also not doing retrospective record as a linear recording. I'm just doing it directly from here. So give that a try. I think that was all of the mailed in questions. Let me jump back to our live questions. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, gonna check the time. All right, so we got a couple minutes left. Okay, just kind of reading through different comments here. Okay, looking through the topics here as we're going through them. Okay, reading through more comments. Just see a comment from Jeff Sabelski saying, so it'll be the kite blowing the street transformer when Greg blacks out. So yeah, my son's friend did get his kite stuck in the power line. So maybe there for a while until after a big snowstorm, maybe. Okay, so just see it's Yamaha AG03. My sound is perfect when I listen to sound with the headphones, but when I listen to my project, it sound the similar. I am a newbie, so if you're, so you have to determine if the signal is getting enough. If you're getting enough signal to be recorded over the USB bus, but there's also probably like a USB monitor knob. And maybe if it's just a monitoring the existing recording, you may have to just, and sometimes it may be like a fader or like a knob that you could use for an input. And you hit a button and that is the USB return from the computer, and make sure that that is up. All right, just reading through more comments. All right, so I think I'm at the end of the comments. So I'm going to do just so I guess I'll take a look at the time. All right, so I think that is just at the very end of the comments. Let me just check because I had two different comment fields kind of open. Might have been looking at last session's comments there, so we'll take a look. So all right, we see a question from Jay. Is there a way to have Cubase / Groove Agent recognize frequencies in a sample to trigger kicks, snares, hats to augment percussive sample? So the full feature version of Groove Agent, you could actually kind of figure out. So I'll show this real quick. So it may not filter out, but it can kind of find similar frequency space, similar frequencies. So say if I drag this to an instrument, we could come over here and slice. Well, we could create our slices. And then you could actually, within the full Groove Agent, it could identify like similar kicks and snares and hi-hats and be able to, you could pick which one of the hi-hats you wanted to use. So, but I'm not sure if it's going to automatically mask them. All right. So with that, let's see if there's any last minute quick questions. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I want everyone to have a wonderful weekend. And again, we'll be doing our live streams just on Tuesday of next week because in the United States, Friday is a holiday. So look for just only one live stream next week. And I want everyone to stay safe and healthy. And we'll see everyone back on Tuesday. Thank you very much.